Why has fighting flared up again in so many places after this lull?
Well, indeed, maybe it's the impact of NATO bombing. There's also been evidence, actually, for the last week or so that here in the west, rebels are beginning to make ground in areas like Yafran, which is to the south of Tripoli. And, of course, in the last couple of days, the town of Zawiya has seen renewed fighting. And that could be quite significant because Zawiya is a rather big oil town, oil terminal, just to the west of Tripoli, only 50 miles away. And it was completely flattened back in March when it was overrun by government troops, and the fact that rebels have been able to gain a little bit of ground there now in Zawiya and renew the fighting, I think, is significant. It's interesting to see how the rebels would have got in there, probably from the south. But of course, this is a significant problem for the Gaddafi regime, because with fighting now erupting on several fronts here in the heartland in the west, it does pose military problems for them. Where do they station their troops? Where do they take their heavy armour? And of course, when they do take the heavy armour to try and defend towns like Zawiya, there's always the risk it's going to be hit from the sky in those NATO air attacks.
There have been quite a few NATO air attacks in the last 24 hours. What impact have they had?
Well, of course, those have been stepped up now for the last week or so. We've had more than 4,000 strike attacks. That's 4,000 bombing runs by NATO planes now since the end of March. They occasionally hit tanks. 14 tanks were destroyed at the start of the weekend. It's been more spread out over the last 24 hours. We can hear them in the skies above us here in Tripoli, but they've been hitting specific targets in Misrata, in Zawiya, in Yafran, and it really does appear that everywhere the Gaddafi military regime tries to go, they're being hit from the air by NATO troops. Having said all of that, of course, the bottom line is that the capital, Tripoli, is still under Gaddafi's control, and there is no sign outwardly that he is prepared to relinquish power. His position remains the same, that he will stay in power until the bitter end. And according to his own side, that the NATO airstrikes are having no effect on his morale at all.
No effect, despite the growing international pressure as well. We've heard from the International Criminal Court, their prosecutors saying that an arrest warrant isn't far away, and also this offer from Turkey of a guarantee if he were to leave.
Well, it's not just the Turks. The African Union in particular have been really trying to persuade Colonel Gaddafi that it's perhaps in his best interest to leave and to go to an unspecified country where he may have immunity from those charges which may be levelled by the International Criminal Court. Despite those offers from the Turks and the African Union, we have seen no evidence at all. In fact, quite to the contrary from the Gaddafi regime. He is actually, perhaps you could argue, painting himself into a corner, but his position remains that he will stay here in Libya and he will stay here with his family, with his sons, until the bitter end.
Wira, thank you very much. Wira Davis in Tripoli. US Congress